Hey everyone, it's Will, and I wanted to talk about the Iranian F-14 since it'll be available to get today. I was able to play about 50 or so games in it yesterday, a day before it was actually released to everyone else. Over the last couple years, I think we've had a bunch of crappy event vehicles, especially in terms of planes. There have been a few decent ones, but a lot of them should have just been vehicles that were in the tech tree in the first place. I'll get into the details of the new F-14 in a minute, but first I want to explain why I think this is an example of what all event vehicles should be. At least in my opinion, event vehicles should either be vehicles made by the country for another, vehicles from nations friendly to that country, or vehicles from that country that were either modified by another or modified by themselves as a one-off test bed or something like that. I think the Iranian F-14 sits right in there since it's a US vehicle that was modified to use weapons that weren't originally built into it. The F-14A, the Sejil, and the R-27R were put on it, though the R-27R couldn't actually be used in real life. Either way, this is the kind of vehicle that Gaijin should be striving to add as an event vehicle from now on, instead of locking vehicles that should be in the tech tree behind a grind or even a paywall. Now onto the actual vehicle itself. After getting to play quite a bit of the F-14 yesterday, I did find that it was pretty good, especially the F-1490s. On top of being a good example of an event vehicle, it's just a good vehicle in general. Really the only somewhat big downside I can see is the shitty RWR, but it's still mostly usable. It's still an F-14A, so it is still fast and pretty maneuverable. You'll still mostly see Phantoms, Tornadoes, MiG-29s, some F-16s, some F-15s, and of course plenty of F-14s when playing it. So you're either more maneuverable or about the same as most people you see, and if you're good enough, you can beat most of the F-16s and F-15s as well, especially if they lack a brain, which there's a pretty good chance they will. Also, if you guys are enjoying this video so far, please like this video and subscribe since it would be a massive help. At first I started off taking a loadout with 2 AIM-9Ps, 2 Sejils, and 4 F-1490s. While both the AIM-54 Phoenix and the F-1490 have a max range of about 150 kilometers, you'll get more range out of the F-1490 than the Phoenix due to its absolutely insane acceleration. I managed to get plenty of kills with the F-14s even as far out as 65 kilometers, though you can use them at closer ranges of course. Pretty much every game at least one missed, whether it was due to them outmaneuvering it or notching or using terrain masking, though I was able to usually get at least 2 kills with them per game. One thing I see people mention is that they technically have less G-pull than the Phoenix by 2 Gs, but I really didn't find this to be an issue at all, and pretty much everyone that missed wouldn't have hit if it were a Phoenix instead. In fact, I think a lot of these kills that I got wouldn't have happened if they were Phoenixes instead, partially due to the range I was launching at and the fact that they beat Phoenixes that were also launched at the same targets. As for AIM-9Ps, while they definitely aren't the best missile by far at 12.3, they are still completely usable. I managed to get myself a fair amount of kills with them, and you just need to know when to fire and how far. Like I said, I originally took 2 Sejils because of their range and acceleration, but I found it's extremely easy for them to be outmaneuvered. Ultimately, I switched one of them out for the R-27R and got a much better result. I usually launch the R-27R from 10 to 20 kilometers in a head-on, usually getting a kill since it was much harder for them to outmaneuver it. I still use the Sejil for longer range targets of course, and after firing all of my F-14s at the enemy and waiting for them to get close enough to pitbull on them, I usually found another target to launch the Sejil on. Typically they would evade it, but there were still a fair amount of times where I would just get a kill since there were a lot of people who just flew in a straight line for some reason. I found this to be the best loadout since it granted me the most kills, usually at least 2 a match, and often 3, 4, or even 5 kills. The other unique weapon on the F-14 is the Yasser, which is an unguided rocket with a Hawk motor and a 750-pound bomb attached to it. Currently it has a 10-meter proxy fuse, so it can kill air targets and is pretty funny when you do it. Also, some other content creators managed to find out that if you fired 2 at the same time, they would proxy on each other, blowing yourself up, which is pretty funny, but also you gotta be careful when you're using them. But being that it has a 10-meter proxy fuse, it does detonate above the ground, so unless it's a light target, many tanks will survive a hit, especially at top tier, even though they shouldn't. So unless Gaijin decides to let us remove that proxy fuse, its use in ground RB is very minimal. You'd probably just be better off using dumb bombs, though there are multiple better planes that you can use in ground RB. It has a battle rating of 11.7 in ground RB, so you will still be at the top BR outside of some planes that are 12.7. In my opinion, this is just a plane for air battles, but if you really don't have high tier jets, but you do have high tier ground for the US, this will be better than nothing, especially for going after enemy planes and enemy helicopters. I haven't used it in sim yet for those of you that are interested, but I would say it's probably just going to be better overall than the Tech Tree F-14A, especially being at the same VR. And I may be wrong, but I believe some of the RWRs you see either don't detect the F-14 or just won't give the enemy a launch warning, so you can pretty easily get plenty of kills there. Again, if you're looking for a plane to grind the whole tree, this isn't it since it's not a premium. However, if you do want a fun and unique plane to grind the last few tiers of the US air tree, this is a pretty good option, especially if you buy a talisman for it. Though the added cost on top of spending all this time to unlock it will be pretty annoying, whether you did grind it or just bought it. However, do remember that putting a talisman on it will also mean that it takes half the time to grind out the modifications on it. Especially when the modifications that are most important, like chaff and the missiles like the F-14 and the R-27R, it can be a rough time to ace this F-14. Also, I did mention earlier that the Iranian F-14 was never actually able to fire the R-27R, so it is possible it will be removed in the future, seeing as though their reasoning for adding it contradicts their own requirements. If they do remove it, I would suggest using the AIM-7E2 over the R-27R and keeping the rest of the loadout I mentioned earlier with the Sedgel and the 4 Fakors, as well as the 2 AIM-9Ps. Ultimately, this Iranian F-14 is one of the best event vehicles we've had in a while, and honestly, I was always expecting it to be a premium instead of an event vehicle. As you've seen so far, I've done pretty well with this F-14, but you can too, since it's not super hard to use. Especially when you're lobbing off 4 Fakors at the beginning of the match, you're likely to at least get a couple of kills, especially on people who aren't suspecting a missile going that fast. Overall, I think this is a pretty good vehicle, and like I said earlier, it's pretty much the perfect event vehicle. If you missed out on some of the tasks, you still can buy them with GE, though it will also be available on the market soon enough. However, I'm not totally sure what the price will be on the market, so it may or may not be cheaper to just GE the tasks. I could see it being as low as 30 Gaijin coin on the market, but I have a feeling it'll be higher. Honestly, the best bet is to get it now, though if you have to GE all your tasks, you might risk it being more than it could be on the market. Though if you just missed one task, there is still an extra one after the F-14 itself, so you can get it for free then. If you guys have any questions about the Iranian F-14 that I didn't answer in this video, please let me know and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Also, if you guys have any video requests, please put them in the comments as well. I hope you guys enjoyed, and please subscribe if you haven't already.